All right, let's dive into something really fascinating. Donna Haraway's A Cyborg Manifesto. You sent this in, and I have to admit, the title alone, I mean, it had me intrigued. What does this have to do with feminism, socialism, AD technology all at once?
Yeah, well, what's intriguing is that Haraway doesn't present the cyborg as, like, a literal being, a creature
Right.
that we might see in a movie, but rather as a kind of metaphor for understanding our changing world, especially in the late 20th century.
Okay, a metaphor.
Yeah, think of it as a lens
A
almost.
lens.
Yeah, for viewing identity, power, and even our bodies in the age of technology.
Okay, a lens. That's a good way to put it. We're looking at excerpts from two versions of the manifesto, a shorter one and a longer one that's more academic. Let's start with the basics. What I mess a cyborg in Haraway's view?
It's more than just robots or AI. Actually, Haraway argues that we're all becoming cyborgs in a sense.
Oh, really?
Yeah, we rely on technology for almost everything from healthcare to communication, pacemakers, prosthetic limbs, even our smartphones, which feel like extensions of ourselves.
Yeah.
All blur the lines between organism and machine.
Yeah, I can definitely see how our reliance on technology makes us, more and more cyborg-like every day. But she takes it further, right? She calls the cyborg a political myth. How does a blend of flesh and machine become a political statement? I'm curious about that.
This is where it gets, really thought-provoking. Haraway uses the cyborg to kind of challenge these traditional boundaries and hierarchies that we often take for granted. Think about the divides between human and animal, or physical and non-physical. These lines are getting really blurry, especially with advancements in technology and science. For Haraway, the cyborg kind of embodies this blurring,
So by embracing the cyborg, are we also embracing a world where these old categories, these old ways of separating things break down? That's a pretty radical concept, isn't it?
Yeah, it is. And Haraway doesn't shy away from that radicalism at all. She uses irony, even blasphemy, and this is a quote. She calls it playful seriousness to make her points.
Playful seriousness, huh?
Yeah, she's not giving us like a, step-by-step guide,
Right.
but rather urging us to grapple with the complexities
Okay.
of our relationship with technology. It's about questioning those assumptions.
The assumptions we often take for granted, yeah.
Yeah.
I like that grappling with complexity, it's not about easy answers. It's about asking the right questions.
Absolutely.
Let's unpack this idea of challenging dualisms a bit more, this kind of
Okay.
breaking down of the separations between things.
Yeah.
She mentions human-animal, organism-machine,
Yeah.
physical, non-physical. What are some real-world examples, I guess, of these distinctions blurring? Can you give me an example?
Yeah. Well, consider, for example, the animal rights movement,
Okay.
which really challenges the traditional idea that humans are superior to other species.
Right.
And then there's the increasing complexity of machines, like artificial intelligence,
Right.
robotics. I mean, these are advancing rapidly, blurring the line between, what's living and what's not.
Yeah, yeah. And on the flip side, we have humans becoming, as Haraway puts it, frighteningly inert,
Yeah.
spending hours glued to our screens. I mean, that's a reality many of us can relate to, wouldn't you say?
Absolutely. And that actually perfectly illustrates the breakdown of the physical and non-physical divide.
Okay.
Think about microelectronics, tiny components with huge power,
Right.
shaping everything from global finance to warfare. We exist in a world of invisible but really powerful forces, and that's a key aspect of, what makes us cyborgs.
So how does all of this connect to feminism? You mentioned that the cyborg challenges the very idea of what it means to be a woman.
Right, right. Haraway argues against this notion of like a single universal experience of being female. She rejects essentialism, this idea that, certain characteristics are inherently feminine. Okay, instead she sees the cyborg as a way to think about unity and coalition building.
Unity and coalition building.
And beyond fixed identities.
Beyond fixed identities.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So instead of assuming we all share the same essential nature, it's about finding that common ground.
Yeah.
Through
Yeah.
shared experiences and goals.
Exactly. Exactly. It's about recognizing the diversity of women's experiences and finding ways to connect and collaborate despite those differences. And Haraway even points to, women of color as kind of embodying a cyborg identity.
Can you elaborate on that a little bit? How does the experience of women of color relate to the cyborg?
Haraway draws on the work of Shayla Sandoval. and her concept of oppositional consciousness.
Oppositional consciousness.
Yeah. And, women of color facing multiple forms of oppression have always had to navigate and challenge dominant societal categories.
Okay.
They kind of embody this fluid, adaptable nature of the cyborg, constantly creating new ways of being and resisting those limitations.
So they're not confined by predefined categories, but they're actively shaping their own identities and realities.
Absolutely.
It's fascinating how she weaves together these different ideas from political theory to lived experiences.
It is. It is. And it's also worth mentioning that she finds a lot of inspiration in feminist science fiction.
Right. She mentions authors like Octavia Butler, Joanna Russ, Samuel R. Delany. What role does science fiction play in her thinking?
She sees science fiction as more than just entertainment.
Right.
It's a tool for exploring alternative possibilities,
Okay.
challenging traditional narratives about gender, embodiment, and power. These stories kind of provide a space to imagine different futures, different ways of being.
It sounds like she's encouraging us to read science fiction, not just for enjoyment, but for critical engagement with these complex themes. So we're building a reading list as we go. But if I'm remembering correctly, Haraway's vision isn't all positive, right? She also talks about the informatics of domination and the homework economy.
You're absolutely right. That's kind of the darker side of the cyborg world.
Okay.
The same technologies that can be used for liberation can also be tools of control and exploitation.
Okay.
The homework economy she describes as one example. It's the idea that work, becomes increasingly dispersed, feminized,
Okay.
often leading to negative consequences for women. Technology enables this shift, but it's driven by forces seeking to maximize profit, often at the expense of workers.
And what about the informatics of domination?
Yeah.
What does she mean by that?
This refers to the use of technology for surveillance, militarization, control of information.
Right.
Think about, power of data collection, algorithm,
Right.
the reach of corporations into our lives. It's a world where power can become, increasingly concentrated and opaque, hidden behind these complex systems that are difficult to understand, let alone challenge.
Sure. It seems like the cyborg is kind of a double-edged sword in a way. It represents, both danger and possibility.
Right, absolutely.
But if she's acknowledging these potential downsides, is she ultimately optimistic about the future? Or what?
That's a great question, and one we'll delve into further in the next part of our deep dive.
Okay.
So stay with us as we continue to explore Haraway's complex and thought-provoking ideas about the cyborg and what it means for all of us.
Okay, sounds good. Welcome back to our deep dive into a Cyborg Manifesto. One thing that struck me as we explore further is how Haraway embraces technology despite its potential downsides. It's kind of a refreshing perspective, I think,
Yeah.
given all the fear and anxiety surrounding technology today.
I agree. It is refreshing. It's not about, simply rejecting technology out of fear, but rather trying to understand it. It's, both its potential for good and for bad.
Mm-hmm.
She encourages us to engage with technology actively,
Okay.
critically,
Yeah.
recognizing its complexities.
I'm starting to see a theme here, embracing complexity, asking the right questions, and avoiding those simplistic answers that we're so often drawn to. And this all ties back to her emphasis on irony, right?
Exactly. For Haraway, irony is kind of a tool for acknowledging contradictions
Okay.
and holding, multiple perspectives at the same time. It's refusing to settle for those easy answers.
Right.
And in the context of technology, it means recognizing that it can be a force for both control and resistance at the same time.
So social media.
Yeah.
It can be used to organize social movements, but also for spreading misinformation.
Exactly. I think
So instead of fearing technology, she's suggesting we try to understand it as part of our constantly changing reality.
Yes, and that's really why she finds the cyborg such a powerful figure, I think. The cyborg embodies that fusion of seemingly opposite things, blurring those lines.
Yeah.
And it reflects, the reality that we ourselves are complex beings shaped by both biology and technology.
Which leads us to one of her most intriguing statements, and I'd love to hear your take on this.
Yeah.
I would rather be a cyborg than a goddess.
Okay.
What do you make of that?
That statement is like a bold rejection of these traditional notions of femininity and power, I think.
Okay.
The goddess, often linked with nature, purity, passive beauty, is really a limited and potentially even a harmful ideal for women. It sets up these unrealistic expectations. And Haraway sees the cyborg as offering, something more.
Something more. So by choosing the cyborg over the goddess, she's advocating for agency and active engagement, even if it means accepting a degree of, I don't know, risk or instability or something like that.
You got it. The cyborg embraces change. Transformation, constantly evolving and adapting.
Yeah.
It's not about achieving some, idealized state of perfection or wholeness or whatever.
Yeah, that makes me think of another passage where she contrasts the cyborg's regeneration with rebirth.
Right.
She says, "We have all been injured profoundly. We require regeneration, not rebirth. And the possibilities for our reconstitution include the utopian dream of the hope for a monstrous world without gender."
Yeah.
It's a powerful distinction. Can you elaborate on that a little bit? What does she mean by that?
Of course. Rebirth, it kind of suggests a return to this original state of purity, which Haraway sees as a myth, really. It doesn't really acknowledge the complexities of our experiences. Regeneration, however, is about, healing from wounds, adapting to change, and creating something new from those experiences.
Building upon them.
Yeah, and it's a more realistic, I think, and ultimately a more empowering way to approach, personal and social transformation.
Right. It resonates with me. It's not about, erasing our past, but building upon them, right?
Right.
And she sees this potential for regeneration on a societal level as well.
Absolutely. She envisions the cyborg as kind of a pathway to new forms of community and solidarity that aren't bound by, rigid hierarchies or essentialist notions of identity.
Okay.
It's about forging these connections based on, shared values and goals, recognizing our common humanity even amidst all our differences.
Yeah, it's a compelling vision, particularly in our increasingly polarized world today. But how do we move toward that cyborg unity, in a practical sense? How do we actually, take these ideas and apply them?
Well, Haraway doesn't offer like a simple roadmap or anything, but she highlights some key strategies. One is this idea of oppositional consciousness, which she borrows from Chela Sandoval.
Right, oppositional consciousness, yeah.
And it's about recognizing and challenging power structures, even those that seem invisible or really ingrained in society. Think about, the subtle ways that gender roles are reinforced or how algorithms can perpetuate bias. Becoming aware of these structures is the first step toward challenging them.
Yeah. Yeah, I can see how that concept, that oppositional consciousness, could be relevant to so many aspects of life, not just, technology or gender, but just everything.
Right.
And she also emphasizes the power of storytelling.
Yes.
Particularly feminist science fiction. How does that fit in?
For Haraway, science fiction isn't just escapism. It's a space to explore possibilities and challenge dominant narratives. And feminist science fiction in particular offers really powerful critiques of, systems of oppression and allows us to envision alternative futures.
So like engaging with these stories helps us to expand our imaginations and consider alternative ways of being in the world.
Precisely. By reading and discussing these stories, we can, question what we consider normal and envision new possibilities for ourselves and for society. It's about, becoming active participants in shaping our own narrative rather than passively accepting the narratives given to us.
Yeah, that's a powerful idea, becoming the authors of our own stories. Now, you mentioned earlier that, there's a darker side to the cyborg world.
Right.
Haraway's concept of the informatics of domination feels particularly relevant today, I think, with the rise of surveillance capitalism and the immense power of these tech giants.
Yeah.
What are your thoughts on that?
It's remarkable, I think, how prescient she was writing this in the 1980s.
Right.
Long before the internet and social media as we know them today.
Yeah.
And she recognized that potential for technology to be used for, control and manipulation on a vast scale and warned against those dangers of systems where power is concentrated and opaque, much like what we're witnessing now, I think, with data collection and algorithmic decision-making.
Yeah, it's chilling how accurately she kind of identified these potential pitfalls, way back then.
Yeah.
And she connects this directly to the exploitation of women, particularly women of color,
Yeah.
within, the global economy.
Yeah. Right. Yes, and this ties into that homework economy we discussed earlier. She sees technology as kind of exacerbating,
Okay.
existing inequalities,
Mhm.
particularly for women who are often already burdened with, caregiving responsibilities,
Right.
lower wage work, whether it's in the home or in the formal economy. Think
Mm.
of, the gig economy
Right, right.
and how it often relies on exploiting workers, with little job security or benefits.
So it's not just about the technology itself, but about who controls it
Exactly.
and how it's used within these existing power structures.
Exactly. Exactly. That's why Haraway emphasizes, I think, the need for a feminist perspective. Okay.
On science and technology.
Okay.
We need to be actively involved in shaping these technologies and ensuring that they're used to create, a more just and equitable world,
Yeah.
not just to reinforce these existing inequalities.
And I imagine that's where feminist science fiction comes in again, providing those alternative visions,
Yeah, absolutely.
inspiring us to imagine different possibilities.
Absolutely. She highlights authors like Octavia Butler, whose work, explores themes of race, gender, and power
Right.
in these futuristic settings, challenging us to think critically about how these forces shape our world.
This deep dive is really highlighting the interconnectedness of all these themes,
Yeah.
Science, technology, feminism, science fiction. It's a truly interdisciplinary approach, I think.
And that's a hallmark of Haraway's work, really. She encourages us to break down those disciplinary silos,
Okay.
recognize how these different areas of knowledge, intersect and inform one another.
Right. It's about seeing the world in a more holistic and nuanced way.
Yeah. Her call to build coalitions based on affinity rather than solely on identity also feels incredibly relevant to our current moment.
Yeah.
We're often encouraged to focus on our differences, but she seems to be advocating for a different approach.
Yes, and I think that's a powerful message. While identity can be a source of, strength and solidarity, it can also be used to create divisions. And
Well,
Haraway challenges us to move beyond those limitations, to build connections based on, shared values, goals, aspirations.
okay.
It's about recognizing our common humanity and working together to create a better future, even if we come from different backgrounds and have different experiences.
It's a message I think we all need to hear right now. So are we all cyborgs in a sense, even if we don't have, robotic limbs or implants or things like that? What do you think?
That's a thought-provoking question.
Mm,
Think about how technology permeates our lives, shaping our relationships, our work, even our sense of self.
yeah.
From social media to smartphones, we're constantly interfacing with machines
Right.
that influence our thoughts, our feelings, our actions.
Right. Yeah.
And the lines between the natural and the artificial are blurring,
Yeah.
and we are becoming, increasingly integrated with technology.
It makes me think about things like, genetic engineering,
Hmm.
artificial intelligence,
Yeah.
even how we modify our bodies
Yeah.
through, diet and exercise and cosmetic procedures.
Yeah.
All of these things, they blur the lines
Yeah.
between human and machine, natural and artificial.
Precisely. Haraway argues that we need to move beyond these simplistic dichotomies
Huh?
and recognize that we are already hybrid beings, shaped by both our biology and technology.
Mhm.
It's not about rejecting technology, but understanding its profound influence and becoming, active participants in shaping its development and use.
Before we move on, I want to touch on another important aspect of the cyborg that Haraway describes.
Mhm.
The cyborg is resolutely committed to partiality, irony, intimacy, and perversity.
Yeah.
Can you unpack that for us a little?
Absolutely. This is where her playful seriousness really shines, I think.
Okay.
Partiality means, rejecting this notion of a single objective truth.
Okay.
It's about embracing multiple perspectives and acknowledging the limits of our own knowledge. And
Mm.
perversity, in this context, is about challenging norms and conventions, embracing the unconventional and the unexpected.
Okay.
It's about questioning everything and not taking anything for granted.
So it's about giving ourselves permission to be messy, contradictory, and authentically ourselves, even if that means going against the grain.
Exactly. And that's such an empowering message, especially for those who have felt, marginalized or excluded. The cyborg identity is open to everyone, regardless of, background, experience, or ability.
Okay.
It's about embracing our shared humanity, even in our differences.
Our shared humanity.
Yeah, it's about recognizing that our differences are what make us unique and valuable, and that those differences can be a source of strength and creativity.
This deep dive is giving me so much to think about. We've explored the blurring of boundaries, the power of storytelling, the need for cyborg unity, and the darker side of the cyborg world. But we still have so much more to unpack,
Yeah.
including Haraway's vision for the future of work, family, and politics in a world where technology is becoming, ever more intertwined with our lives. What can our listener expect in the final part of our exploration?
In the next segment, we'll delve deeper into Haraway's provocative ideas about how the cyborg can help us, reimagine these really fundamental aspects of our society.
Okay.
We'll explore her critiques of traditional power structures and her vision for, alternative ways of organizing our lives and our communities.
Okay.
It's a challenging, but ultimately, I think, a hopeful vision for a future where technology is used to empower rather than control,
Right.
and where our differences are celebrated rather than used to divide us.
This has been a fascinating journey into the world of the cyborg.
It has.
We've only scratched the surface, I think, of Haraway's complex and thought-provoking ideas.
Yeah.
But I hope our listener has gained a deeper understanding of her brilliance and a starting point for their own explorations.
Yeah, absolutely.
Welcome back to our deep dive into Donna Haraway's A Cyborg Manifesto. We've covered a lot of ground, exploring how technology is blurring boundaries and kind of reshaping our identities. Now, I'm curious to hear more about how she envisions the future,
Yeah,
particularly in the realms of work, family, and politics.
right.
Where does she see all this going?
Well, it's important to remember that Haraway isn't really trying to, predict the future, but
Yeah.
rather to kind of provoke us
Okay.
into thinking critically about the possibilities and challenges ahead.
Yeah.
She wants us to question the assumptions that often limit our vision of what's possible.
So let's start with work. She paints a rather bleak picture, I think, of the homework economy, where stable employment becomes increasingly rare, and
Yeah.
and the line between work and home dissolves even further.
Right.
How does she see technology shaping the future of work?
She sees technology driving, both greater flexibility and greater exploitation
Oh.
in the workforce. Traditional 9-to-5 jobs, they may become less common,
Yeah.
but that doesn't necessarily mean, more freedom or autonomy for workers.
Right.
And she's particularly concerned about, the impact on women who are often already burdened with caregiving responsibilities, lower wage work, and technology could, exacerbate these existing inequalities.
She also talks about the feminization of labor, which, it isn't just about more women entering the workforce. It's
Yeah.
about the devaluation of certain types of work, traditionally associated with women, even when men are doing them.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Right.
It's about how, care work, service work, and other forms of labor often seen as women's work are consistently undervalued and underpaid.
Right.
And Haraway argues that, technology could accelerate these trends as automation and outsourcing erode traditional job security and create a more, precarious and competitive labor market.
So it's not a very optimistic outlook necessarily.
right.
But she doesn't seem to advocate for returning to traditional structures or rejecting technology altogether.
Right.
What's her alternative? What's the other side of that coin?
Her focus is on encouraging us to develop new ways of thinking about, work, family, and community.
Okay.
Ways that are, adaptable to a world increasingly shaped by technology.
Okay.
She wants us to consider models that are more flexible, equitable, and human-centered, not solely driven by, profit.
Okay. One of the ideas she proposes is the concept of affinity groups as kind of a new model for social and political organization.
Yeah.
Can you explain what she means by that?
Yeah, affinity groups are essentially groups of people who come together based on, shared values, goals, or interests, rather than on these traditional categories of identity like race or class or gender.
Okay.
They're meant to be, fluid and flexible, forming and dissolving as needed to address specific issues or challenges.
So it's a more like decentralized and organic way of building community and solidarity.
Yeah.
Kind of like, I don't know, grassroots movements or online communities that form around, shared passions and interests.
That's a great way to put it. Yeah.
Yeah.
It reflects, I think, her emphasis on moving beyond these rigid hierarchies
Right.
and embracing the complexity and fluidity of human connections.
Right.
It's about recognizing that our commonalities can often transcend our differences.
And she sees this as particularly important for women who have often been excluded from, traditional power structures.
Absolutely, yeah.
Right.
She argues that women, and particularly women of color, bring, unique perspectives and experiences
Mm-hmm.
to the table, perspectives that are often marginalized or ignored in these traditional hierarchies.
Oh.
And affinity groups offer a way for women to create spaces where their voices can be heard and their contributions valued.
So it's about empowering those who have been traditionally marginalized to shape their own destinies and contribute their unique talents and perspectives to society.
Precisely.
And this brings us back to her belief in the power of storytelling and myth-making.
Yeah.
She sees feminist science fiction as a vital resource for imagining and creating these alternative futures.
Absolutely.
She really emphasizes the importance of storytelling.
She does.
Why is that so crucial in her view? Why is it so important?
Because the stories we tell ourselves, they shape how we see the world and what we believe is possible. And dominant narratives often, reinforce existing power structures and limit our imaginations.
Right. Okay.
And by creating new stories, new myths, we can open up new possibilities and inspire new ways of being in the world.
So feminist science fiction provides a space for exploring those alternative narratives.
Yeah.
And challenging the status quo.
Exactly.
It allows us to experiment with different ways of organizing society, different ways of relating to each other and to technology. It's a space for imagining worlds where, gender roles are fluid, where technology is used to empower rather than control, and where diversity is celebrated. All these great things.
Right.
What I find, I think, so inspiring about Haraway's work is this: her underlying sense of hope,
Yeah.
even in the face of these pretty daunting challenges.
Right.
She acknowledges that potential for technology to be used for harm, but she doesn't succumb to despair.
Her hope is grounded in a belief in our collective capacity for change, I think.
Right.
It's not, naive or utopian, but
Right.
rather a pragmatic belief that we have the power to shape our own destiny,
Yep.
even if the path ahead is uncertain and complex.
As we wrap up this deep dive into Cyborg Manifesto,
Yeah.
what key takeaways would you like our listener to ponder? What do you hope they come away with?
I hope they'll come away with a deeper appreciation for the power of metaphor and storytelling in shaping our understanding of the world.
Right.
The cyborg for Haraway is more than just a fictional concept. It's a tool for thinking critically about our relationship with technology and its profound impact on our lives and our societies.
And I hope they'll be inspired by her call to action, her invitation to become active participants in shaping a future that is more just, equitable, and aligned with our values.
Yeah.
It's about challenging assumptions, embracing complexity, and recognizing our shared humanity, even in the face of all our differences.
Beautifully said.
Yeah.
Haraway's work is both a challenge and a call to hope, I think,
Right.
reminding us that we have the power to create the future we desire.
Right.
It won't be easy. But as she reminds us, cyborg unities are monstrous and illegitimate. In our present political circumstances, we could hardly hope for more potent myths for resistance and recoupling. So, let's embrace the monstrous and work together to create a more just and liberated world.
That's a powerful message to end on.
Yeah.
Thank you for guiding us through this deep dive into Donna Haraway's, groundbreaking work.
It's been a pleasure.
And to our listener, we hope this exploration has sparked your curiosity and inspired you to think differently about the world around you.
Yeah.
Remember, the future is not something that happens to us.
Right.
It's something we create together.
Absolutely.
Until next time, stay curious.